There's this common idea in economics that if you just write better laws for women, you'll automatically get better economic outcomes for them. It sounds right, doesn't it? It feels like simple cause and effect, but what if it's not that simple? We're going to look at a really fascinating story from the Gulf today that kind of turns that whole assumption on its head.
So, that really brings us to the big question, right? Do perfect laws actually create perfect outcomes? We're about to dive into a real-world paradox that shows the answer is, well, it's a lot more complicated than you might think. Okay, so let's meet our two case studies. On one side, you've got Qatar, scoring a perfect 100 on the World Bank scale for women entrepreneurs. I mean, it literally doesn't get any better than that on paper. And then you have Kuwait with a score of 75. Now, just looking at these numbers, you'd bet on Qatar to be the powerhouse for female startups, right? Every single time. But get this is the twist. The country with the lower score, Kuwait, actually has one of the highest rates of female-led startups in the entire Middle East. So what on earth is going on here? How is the country with more legal roadblocks outperforming the one that's supposedly perfect? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to solve.
To figure this out, let's start with our model student, Qatar. It's a country that has, by all accounts, built a flawless legal framework from the ground up.
And when I say flawless, I mean it. A full 100.0. This score didn't just happen by accident. Oh no. It's the result of a very deliberate, top-down strategy. It's a huge part of their Qatar National Vision 2030, where they see legal equality as the absolute cornerstone of a modern economy.
So what does a perfect score actually get you in the real world? Well, it means a woman faces zero, and I mean zero, gender-based legal hurdles when she wants to register a business, sign a contract, or even just open a bank account. Legally speaking, the runway is completely clear for takeoff.
And here's a really great example of a subtle but super powerful reform they made. They equalized the retirement ages. Now, you might think, hey, earlier retirement for women, that's a perk. But if you think about it economically, it actually cuts short their working lives. That means less time to earn and less time to build up the savings and capital you need to launch a business later on. So this one little legal tweak has a huge downstream effect.
All right, now let's pivot. Let's head over to our second case study, Kuwait. This is a totally different story. It's a story of legal barriers and red tape that somehow has a booming startup scene.
So Kuwait's score of 75 isn't just some abstract number. It points to real, tangible gaps in the system. For instance, just like we were talking about, women in Kuwait still face earlier retirement ages, which cuts short that critical time they have to build up capital for a future venture.
And beyond the laws, there's this thing the source material calls administrative drag. Basically, the official way to start a business is a slog. You're bouncing between different ministries, you're buried in paperwork, and the government's digital systems aren't quite as slick as some of their neighbors. It's tough. And to get things moving in this formal system, you often have to rely on something called WASTA. It's all about using your personal network and connections to push your applications through the system. It's a way to cut through the bureaucracy, sure, but it also makes it more complicated and expensive to get started officially. So with all these hurdles, you'd think Kuwait's startup scene would be struggling, but it's not. And this right here is where we find the key to the whole paradox. It turns out that in Kuwait, there's a commercial culture so powerful, it just runs circles around the law. You've essentially got these two forces in a constant tug of war. On one side, you have the slow, clunky legal system, but on the other, you have this incredibly dynamic commercial culture. I mean, we're talking about a society that was a merchant state with deep trading roots long before oil was ever discovered. That entrepreneurial spirit, it's just in the DNA. And this incredible culture has created the ultimate workaround. This is the real way people start businesses in Kuwait. Entrepreneurs, especially women, they just launch directly on platforms like Instagram, they build their brand, find their customers, test their products, and completely sidestep all that initial red tape. They only bother with the official paperwork once the business is already a success. It's brilliant, it's fast, and boy does it work. This quote from our source material just nails it. Commercial capability and cultural acceptance compensate for slower institutional reform. In other words, the entrepreneurial hustle is so strong, it just finds a path. It flows around the obstacles like water. And listen, this isn't just a theory. It has created massive success stories. We're talking about female-led brands in fashion, beauty, and food that have become huge regional players using this exact playbook.
Founders like Taiba Al-Humaidi, platforms like Butikat, they all started small and informal, built a following online, and then scaled up into major companies. This isn't the exception, it's the norm. So, let's pull all of this together. What is the big lesson here? What do we learn when we see these two forces, law and culture, go head to head? This table breaks it down really nicely. Qatar's model is all about top-down legal reform. Its strength is predictability and certainty. Kuwait's model is the opposite. It's bottom-up, driven by that commercial culture, which makes it super adaptable. But here's the catch. Each has a weakness. In Qatar, just because you build the perfect legal highway doesn't mean everyone starts driving on it immediately. And in Kuwait, that informal, agile approach doesn't have the same long-term stability. So at the end of the day, this isn't about which country is right or wrong. The real takeaway is that for sustainable long-term success, you need both. You need that top-down legal clarity that Qatar is building, but you also need the energetic, bottom-up market access that Kuwait has in spades. You need both pieces of the puzzle. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. If you're trying to spark real economic change, where do you put your energy first? Do you focus all your efforts on writing the perfect rulebook from the top down? Or do you invest in nurturing a powerful, adaptable culture from the bottom up, trusting that it will find a way to succeed no matter what the rules say? The answer, as we've seen, is probably somewhere right in the middle.